Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, episode 63. Coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. We got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about and some things that I missed. Not this last show, but the one before that. Some things I missed on the missing vanishings of like large amounts of people. Some interesting stuff about that. And we are joined, as always.
Wait.
But
you missed something about vanishing people?
Yeah, I have no idea how it happened, but like I was looking at this vanishing stuff and I completely missed some things.
Oh my God, you missed some really large things, perhaps.
Yeah, like large amounts of information about missing things. I missed it. Yeah, so I found that stuff and we're going to go through that stuff. And that's interesting. And we are joined, as always, by the Watcher, who hopefully is not already in hypersleep. You out there, buddy? Out there in space somewhere?
Yeah. That was crazy. I remember that. It was 2 weeks ago. You were following these details down this trail. They went around a bend 6 feet in front of you, and then they just disappeared.
That's right. Damn it. 6 seconds, and it's gone. Yep. And I didn't follow it into the woods because there are no babies in the woods. So... All right, but before we get to that, news. Space news. So I have some space news.
Space weather news?
Space weather news, and it's actually from spaceweather.com. Let me pull this up here. It's like Kyle was saying earlier when we were talking before the show started. Everything's kind of quiet on the space weather news front, but there's some interesting stuff that just recently happened. And since we're a weekly podcast, we can talk about stuff that just recently happened. It doesn't have to be today.
Yeah.
Right? So first interesting thing I saw is this. Okay, so it says, every night a network of NASA's all-sky cameras scans the skies above the United States for meteoritic fireballs. Automated software maintained by NASA's Meteoroid Environment Office calculates their orbits, velocity, penetration, depth in Earth's atmosphere, and many other characteristics. Daily results are presented here on spaceweather.com. And they say on August 28th, the network reported 25 fireballs. That's a lot.
Wait a minute. That was today.
Yeah.
So that is current.
That is current. But not everything is current. In this diagram of the inner solar system, all of the fireball orbits intersect at a single point, Earth. The orbits are color-coded by velocity from slow to fast. Slow is red to fast, which is blue. And they have a picture here, which I will try to remember to post in the show notes. It's pretty interesting. It shows like all these massive orbits that come from all over the place, and all of them are hitting Earth.
So they were meteorite.
Yeah, like okay. They're fireballs, so they were burning in the atmosphere. So all of these things, and they're all 25 of them. You know. The next thing I have, this is pretty cool.
It's snowing in space.
Electricity flows through the soil of Norway. When a geomagnetic storm erupts, most eyes naturally turn to the sky looking for auroras. But during the surprisingly strong G3 class geomagnetic storm of August 26th, there was action underfoot as well. Probes buried in the ground in Norway detected strong currents of electricity moving through the soil. This chart recording made by Rob Stams of the Polar Light Center in Lotofin shows wild swings in current during the storm's peak, and then there's a graph here with some massive peaks in it. The currents were remarkably strong, says Stams, who has been monitoring ground currents outside his Arctic observatory for many years. During the magnetic storm, voltages surged from 10 millivolts to 10 millivolts per meter, or 10 volts per kilometer. That's about 10 times stronger than normal. These are pretty rare readings without a strong solar flare during solar minimum. Why does electricity flow through the ground during a geomagnetic storm? It's basic physics. Changing magnetic fields causes current to flow in wires and other conductors. In most places, soil can conduct electricity due to the presence of dissolved salts and minerals. So when the local magnetic field begins to vibrate, electricity naturally begins to flow. Remember how Yeah. Currents induced by geomagnetic storms can cause voltage fluctuations in power systems and, in rare cases, complete blackouts, which is the percentage chance of 1.
Yeah, 1% chance of blackouts today, folks, according to NOAA.
Right. So the last story is the storm is over. Earth's magnetic field is quieting finally after about 48 hours of a surprisingly strong geomagnetic storm sparked auroras seen from the Arctic Circle to the continental U.S. Arctic sky watchers should nevertheless remain alert for auroras. Earth is passing through a stream of high-speed solar wind, and according to NOAA, there is a 40% chance of renewed minor storms on August 28th.
Cool. That leads into my story perfectly. I found this some point last week. Mysterious purple and white ribbons of light seen dancing across the sky may represent a never-before-identified type of sky glow.
Oh.
While amateur photographers have been documenting the phenomenon for decades, scientists only began to study it in 2016, which means it's never been properly identified. Initial research suggested the lights, which have come to be known as Steve, may be a type of aurora. Though slightly different than the ones we're used to. A new study, however, has determined that this is not the case. According to the researchers, Steve is the result of different atmospheric processes, making it an entirely distinct phenomenon.
Wait, why
Steve?
Why is it Steve?
Just
all right, sorry. I'm just trying to figure this out.
This is not a joke, folks. This is legit science. Steve was initially given its name in honor of the 2006 film Over the Hedge, and the title was later accepted in the scientific community as a backronym.
Steve is a backronym.
Yeah, because they decided to make it an acronym after it was already named Steve. The backronym now stands for Strong Thermal Emission Velocity Enhancement. This type of light event appears closer to the equator than normal aurora. In the latest study, researchers analyzed a Steve event that occurred over eastern Canada on March 28, 2008. The team compared images from ground-based cameras with data from NOAA's Polar Orbiting Environmental Satellite, which was overhead at the time and can measure charged particles raining down towards Earth. Unlike a traditional aurora, which is produced as electrons and protons pour into the ionosphere, the researchers found there were no charged particles associated with Steve. This suggests it wasn't an aurora at all. Our main conclusion is that Steve is not an aurora, says B. Gallardo Lacour, a space physicist at the University of Calgary in Canada and lead author of the new study, Steve, Geophysical Research Letters. No, I threw that in there. Okay. So right now, we know very little about it, and that's the cool thing, because this has been known by photographers for decades. But for scientists, it's completely unknown. Instead of being an aurora, the researchers say the Steve events can be classified as a type of sky glow, but they still aren't quite sure what's causing them. It's pretty cool.
Steve events.
Yeah, Steve. Anybody seen a Steve out there lately? They have some images. You can look them up. They're like long ribbons of light.
Ah.
They're just like these long filaments of light that...
Okay, yeah, I have seen pictures of that.
Yeah.
Some people have thought they were noctilucent type things, but no one was really clear on it. Now I guess science is catching up, and they're going to call them Steves.
Yeah, they were probably just like, oh, pish posh, but, you know... A scientist obviously eventually saw one, and they were like, holy shit, Steve!
I thought a Steve was a large crystal. You give me crystal, I show. Oh, okay. He's back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He dropped his electrospectrometer and had to put on his spacesuit. But now the Watcher is...
Go grab a spare battery out of the outside of the super secret bunker in the super secret space station.
So, sticking with space, my next story is about NASA's Jim Bridenstine, who is the chief of NASA. And this whole story is about how he's saying he wants to send people back to the moon.
All right.
To stay.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Space Force!
Yeah, exactly, dude. Then it's great. He talks about how the moon is like all the, he's saying what I've been wondering this whole time is like everybody's talking about Mars, but it's like, dude, the best way to get to Mars
is to start from the moon.
Start from the moon, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, dude, it's right there.
Right.
We can run all of the simulated tests of living in strange places right there where we're close to home. It doesn't take you 2 years to get back here.
Right. There will be different problems on Mars, but the moon is a great place to start. I mean, if you don't start from the moon, you're a moron.
Right, because it's right there.
Yeah.
And we can... So this
also you can build ships. Like the moon has a lot of materials on it, and you can build first of all, it has helium-3 all over the place, which is a great fuel.
Yeah.
Second of all, you can build ships on the moon, like massive ships that don't have to withstand the gravity of Earth or escape it. Right. So for your trip to Mars, you can build this large, like, low G ship that doesn't have to be supported. And you don't have to worry about trying to build it in Earth's orbit, which means you have to ship materials up, so you can get all the materials on the moon where the gravity is like less than 1/6.
Yeah, and then you can, yes. There's a picture of a Steve event.
Steve, yeah. I remember people saying that those looked like some kind of knockoff.
Double Steve event. That's so beautiful. What does it mean?
It means Steve.
So I just wanted to. He makes a great point. This guy, Bridenstine. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but he was talking about how, when we first went to the moon, that was like this big jump and leap in our abilities, and then like that whole program kind of shut down, and then there was this huge gap.
Yeah.
Before we started the space station.
Right.
And now we have this like space station, but he's saying the space station project is going to be coming to an end.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want there to be another huge gap. In, it was like 40 years of where we weren't really doing much.
Right. Well, sending out probes, but
but
that's non-human spaceflight.
Yes, he's all about human. He's like because the ultimate thing is we got to get out there.
Right. If we're not trying to get up there, then we're not doing anything. Yes, we can send out.
Yes, we can learn. We can send out, cameras and stuff and learn about things, but it's not going to gain us the experience of actually what we have to do to be there.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was great. I just want to read this portion of it. He says, if you go back to 2009, the United States, through NASA, made a critical discovery, which is the moon has hundreds of billions of tons of water ice. To me, that should have changed our direction immediately.
Yeah.
From 1969, when we first landed on the moon, up to 2009, a lot of people believed that the moon was bone dry.
Yeah.
In 2008, the Indians did an experiment, and they realized there was water ice on the moon. And then we did an experiment and realized how much water ice could potentially be on the moon at the poles. So the question is, during those 40 years, we missed that. What else have we missed?
Yeah.
So he's like, his goal is to...
But you dot Indians or feather Indians?
Maybe both. Maybe they collaborated. Collab.
Yeah. We're all Indians here. Come on.
Yeah, so he was saying, like, we need to get more stuff on the moon. Just keep putting more and more stuff on the moon. And then, build a place. So they're having meetings about it, and it's a big goal for the NASA chief.
All right.
And he calls it a gateway.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I was like, dude, he obviously read Sitchin. Like, the moon is a gateway. Like,
yeah.
Just like they talk about the other planets and stuff. Gateway this, gateway that. And like in the Book of Enoch. He talks about the gateways that they took him to.
Yeah. Yeah, the moon is definitely a gateway to the rest of the solar system.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, if you read Larry Niven's stuff, he kind of jokes about, like, in his future history stuff, I think Heinlein called his stuff future history, but in Niven's stories, the characters have this joke about, like, once you get into space, why do you want to go right back down into a hole? In other words, into a gravity well. Like, and so he has this whole, like, the belters that he calls them, the people that live in the asteroid belt and they're doing all this mining and stuff. They think people that live in holes are crazy. You're like, you're crazy. Why live down in that hole?
Yeah, the Watcher's pointing out, imagine what we could do with an observatory built on the moon. That's awesome. So this is the cool thing, too. He's talking about the first gateway is going to be a near rectilinear halo orbit around the moon that can be powered by low propulsion capability, like solar electric propulsion. so that it stays. So we have a space station in orbit around the moon
Yeah.
all the time, and then our stuff can get like we can always be easily sending stuff there. We don't have to worry about landing it. That
You have a specific landing pod. Yeah. That
yeah,
goes
it
up
has
and down.
that thing that can do that, and then
Yeah.
and then eventually build the base on the moon so we can send stuff up to the orbiter.
Yep.
And then that's Gateway 1, and then Gateway 2.
Yep.
Yeah, it's freaking awesome, dude. I love it.
Yeah, and then once you start building launchers on the moon, like large magnetic launchers, because then you just like you
Charge
like,
it up with solar. And
You mine iron. Yeah, exactly. You mine iron off the moon. You build a bunch of like iron canisters that you can fill. You know, think of them like the cargo boxes that they put on the backs of trucks.
Yeah.
Right. Those cargo boxes are put on the backs of. They're put on trains. They're put on big ships. They're stacked up on big ships. So they're all like they're all standardized, big metal boxes that are just that you can do whatever with. You can put whatever you want in there. So on the moon, you build those. You just make them round, like cylinders, and then you have these large, like they're basically rail guns. You know, and so you pick the right area, a long flat plane that has a mountainous slope at the end of it, and you put these giant metal hoops that are magnetic accelerators, and it goes up, you know, and you just fire those, you know, and it comes off the moon going like some ridiculous speed, and it can go wherever you want it to go.
Yeah.
And you just wait for the moon to be in the right place to shoot it to Earth, or you shoot it to the space station, you shoot it to Mars, you shoot it to Saturn, you shoot it to the belt, whatever.
Yeah. And he was saying he wants to land all over the moon. Like everywhere we landed was right near the equator
Yeah.
of the moon.
Yeah.
I mean, we have not explored hardly anything on the moon. He was like, I want people landing everywhere on it.
Yeah.
The poles, everywhere.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
we need to explore all kinds of stuff that, you know.
Right. The Apollo landings were like similar to, I mean, like pioneering always happens like that, right? You have the first guys that are crazy or they're military, you know, and they go out there and just try not to die, and they land and they kind of walk around and they either get shot by natives or don't, and then they come back.
Yeah.
And they either get sick or they don't. And then maybe they make it back, and then they can tell you what happened, you know.
Yeah. And what they learned, and then we can build better ships.
That's right.
We need more ships.
I mean, the first Apollo landing, they were afraid that that the Eagle would sink in like many, many meters of dust.
Yeah.
And when that didn't happen, everybody ignored the fact that was weird.
Wouldn't that be crazy if that really did happen? And so ever since then, it was like dust suits. You got to just like get out and
Yeah.
just push your way through the dust until donk, you hit like a rock. Oh, I found a rock.
Climb it.
All right. We need to build airless hand leaf blowers for the moon dust.
Leaf blowers.
What will they blow?
Yeah.
Dust.
Yeah, there was also some theories that Mars might have oceans of sand that is so fine, such fine particles that it would like flow like oil. And they could be really, really deep, you know, and there could be life down in those. So some of those huge, like flat plains on Mars might actually be oceans of extremely fine sand that like would flow like a liquid.
Yeah. Like maybe there's like lakes of liquid mercury down in there. I mean, maybe there's, you know, there's mercury fish, like things that swim around and
Could be.
But they'd have to be made of heavier particles than
Yeah.
mercury.
Yeah, it would be hard to swim in mercury if if you weren't heavier than it, and it's pretty heavy. It's pretty dense. Mercury fish.
I've always wanted to swim in a big pool of mercury. God, that would be awesome.
You could float on top of it. Really
I know, you
easily.
could just dive down in there and then just like it would just shoot you up, you know?
Yeah. It would probably hurt to dive in it.
You have to wear a special mercury diving helmet. It's like pointed.
Yeah. That would suck to dive into mercury and like have it break your fingers and knock you out and you're all
It seems like it would be cool though.
Yeah. Maybe if you didn't dive.
Just do a cannonball.
That would probably hurt too. Just go down the steps.
All right, I got one more story. This is kind of a short one. Breakthrough as dinosaur DNA structure is recreated by scientists.
Really?
Dun dun dun. Researchers at the University of Kent say their groundbreaking studies unlock one of the greatest mysteries about the prehistoric monsters: why they came in such varied shapes and sizes. It is also said the team's work will explain how dinosaurs were able to be the most dominant species on Earth for nearly 200 million years. Professor Griffin,
Acronyms.
who led the research, said they were able to map out the creature's genetic code by studying the DNA of their closest living relatives, turtles and birds. It is believed that dinosaurs were so varied in their appearances because they had vastly more chromosomes than humans possess. Professor Griffin explained, "We think it generates variation. Having a lot of chromosomes enables dinosaurs to shuffle their genes around much more than other types of animals. This shuffling means that dinosaurs can evolve more quickly and so help them survive so long as the planet changed."
And play cards really well.
Yeah. Wait.
Shuffling.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Rebecca added, "The fossil evidence and now our evidence reinforces the idea that rather than birds and dinosaurs being distant relatives, they are one and the same.
Yeah.
The birds around us today are dinosaurs." That's a quote.
All right.
Finally,
Yeah.
birds are dinosaurs. So next time you see a dinosaur, you go feed the dinosaurs outside your house. You know?
Just remember that they're
they
all
like seeds.
Yeah, they're all looking at you thinking, we used to be able to kill you. And
But unfortunately-
that day will come again.
But unfortunately for Jurassic Park fans, the team has no plans to attempt to bring T-Rex back to life. Damn it!
Maybe because they know that
Life finds a way.
You beat me to it.
sorry.
That was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dinosaurs are birds. That's all I'm trying to say. They're freaking birds.
Birds are dinosaurs.
And birds are dinosaurs.
Yeah. Okay, so the watcher is pointing out that hermit crabs have 254 chromosomes and they haven't evolved or changed at all in millennia. The standard model says they have been more or less static for millions of years. Wait,
Yeah, well, they're hermits. They don't get out much.
they also are
like, why don't you just
they're also
come out of
home
your
wreckers.
shell?
Yeah, they steal other people's homes.
Yeah.
Freaking squatters.
Can I move into your basement? And never leave.
He's always hanging out on the front doorstep. And they're stealing them from Cephas,
Yeah, that's right.
right?
That's right.
Cephas and snails, other mollusks. Yeah. So maybe that's okay. Because, Cephas are trying to take over the world.
Yeah, they're just really paranoid. I mean, they already have an exoskeleton, and they're like, I need more armor.
Yeah. The crabs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Give me that house.
Yeah. They had no need to evolve because they were so good at stealing houses. They didn't need to develop a better shell. They waited for everybody else to do it.
Yeah. What was that story you told me about taking the guy's cart? You're like, I'm gonna use this. And the guy was like, felt like he was being robbed. Give me that cart.
Yeah. Yeah, in the grocery store. Yeah.
Give me that cart.
Yeah.
All right. So, was it last week? Was it this past Saturday we went to do the cave mapping? I want to talk about that.
The week before last. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got invited to
It's
go
on the 18th.
Yeah. So we got invited to go out to a friend's property where they've got a pretty big cave. It's a pretty substantial cave, especially one for just being on private land. And they were getting some members of the Texas, specifically
Cavers Association.
the Bayer County Speleological Society.
Oh, okay.
So these guys came out and they were, they do this for, I don't know if they do it, I don't think they do it for a living, but they do it a lot. They do it on, they said they go to Government Canyon and other places
Yeah.
and they map all these whenever anybody finds a cave, they go out there and they map it. And so we were going out to kind of explore the cave with them and learn how they do this. Because, when you're in a cave, you can't use GPS and you can't, And as soon as I got in there, I was like, we need drones with lasers. Like LiDAR. But it was really interesting, like the way that they did it. They had set up stations, right? So you get in there and you kind of, I guess the first thing you do is you kind of get an idea. And in this case, the cave is a known thing. There was a previous map that was made that was not as good as the one they're making. But if it was a new cave, you basically go in there and you explore it. You explore the large open areas real quickly, and then you start figuring out, okay, so where we're going to make stations, and you set up stations that are basically line of sight from each other. So you have station one, in one of they start in the large rooms, and then they work their way outwards from that towards the entrances and towards the end of the cave. So you have station one, and then station two is across the large room, and where you can see them in the best places. And station two needs to have line of sight to where you think you're going to go next. And then they had these instruments. I can't remember what they were called. One of them is basically a compass, and one that would detect
an altimeter or something.
Yeah, it would detect a rise in or a lowering in height. So it was basically
the angle. Basically, it would measure the angle at which you were looking. So it had a sight glass on it, and if you're having to look up, you're also looking along the axis. And if you look up at all, it measures the angle, and
right. So as you're looking through the sight glass, you can see the numbers changing. So it'll tell you what, and you just read the number on there, and they've got both sides, and they're using metric. So you look in there, and you call out the number, and you write it down. And then they have the compass. So you use that too, and you get the heading, right? And then on the other side, station two, the person there does the same thing back towards station one. That way you get two readings. Like he gives you the heading towards station one from station two, and the elevation change, right? And then they were using laser. They did use lasers
for measuring
for measuring distance, because it was way faster. So you'd hold the laser, measure
clinometer.
Clinometer. And in the rangefinder, which is a laser, you would find so the person in station two would hold a light or something directly over their station, because the station is
so the station is just a rock, a point somewhere on a surface, either a stalagmite, stalactite, whatever surface that you can also have line of sight to the next station.
Right, and usually they'd mark it with tape and write a number on it. Right,
they use the tape for a big marker, and then they'd actually put a dot, they'd take a small marker and actually make a mark on the rock that's the actual station point.
Right.
And the tape is something that you can
see from a distance. Yeah. So when you're just coming in there, you can see, there's station one, and over there is station two. But so the stations are actually little tiny dots that they would put on there with a marker. But then so you would do everything based on that. So when you're doing the elevation rise, you didn't have to be directly over the dot, but you didn't need to be at the same elevation as it.
Right.
And then when you're doing the compass, you needed to have it basically directly over the dot so that you're getting the exact right heading.
But it didn't have to be the same elevation as
right.
the dot.
You could do it way above it or way below it. You just had to be pointing towards the other one. And then you would find the distance, and the other guy, so both stations would shoot distance towards each other, and then you would get the numbers. And then the thing that took the longest was somebody had to sit down with a piece of graph paper, engineering graph paper, and actually start drawing a sketch of the room itself. And they had all these little different symbols that meant things like stalactites, stalagmites, large boulders. And then the sketch itself would be a kind of think of a blueprint for a house. You'll see on one page, you're looking at the house from the front, and then on the next page, you're looking down at it from a floor plan. And then, on the next page, you're looking at different parts of it. So it's so they would draw down, a top-down view of the room and give a basic thing, but they would do it very meticulously using the graph paper as a they would have a legend of how far each little square in that graph was.
Yeah.
And then they would measure to the walls and everything like that and draw this very meticulous sketch of the room, and then give you also profiles of the ceiling and the floor. And it's difficult because the cave we were in had lots of what did they call it? The collapsed
I don't know. It was just like debris from the. I don't know what they call
enormous boulders stacked on top of each other, sometimes very close to the ceiling, or or like hanging down from the floor. So we're crawling over and around extremely large rocks. So the rooms would have been, in some places, very big, except that they were full of huge boulders somehow. Yeah. And so a lot of times we couldn't figure out where the actual floor of the cave was, the original floor, because the stacked up debris was so deep.
Yeah.
You could see down, in places you couldn't possibly get, and you could see that there were more rocks or some dirt down there, but you never could tell where the actual floor of the cave was.
Yeah.
But there were some large open rooms in there and some fascinating, and they were saying some very unique formations.
Yeah.
And that one, what do they call it? The flow stone, that huge flow stone, which is basically a massive stalagmite that had built up of its very rounded shape, and it was enormous, and it filled that whole area of the cavern. And he was saying, man, you need to get back here with some distilled water and clean that thing off. It'd be beautiful, because it's everything in there is dirty. Everything in there is covered in clay or bat guano and guano bowls.
The amount of clay deposits in that cave is crazy.
Yeah. And there were also some markings from people who, over the years, over the centuries, had come in there and carved their names into stuff. But one of the things that fascinated me was the flood deposits up high in some of the big caverns.
Yeah.
And look up there, and there's, so in some places the walls were very flow shaped. They had these very smooth curves, and the ceiling would even be smooth, except for places where there were stalactites hanging down. But otherwise, the ceiling was incredibly smooth, And then on the uppermost indented curve in the wall, there's these piles of rubble that are obviously it's river rock and clay and dirt. And you're how did that get there? So that was very interesting, the whole mapping thing. And I don't think we didn't finish mapping the cave, but they did the two main.
Yeah,
big
it was
rooms.
just so complex that the guy doing the drawing
couldn't keep up.
He was just he had to take his time.
Yeah.
Because, to get it as accurate as possible.
Yeah.
But that was cool because, looking at the paper, the whole room that he would be designing would be at an angle, and, it's just like a map. Up is north.
Yeah.
And so the whole design is going across the page at an angle or whatever, and then he would just have to go to a different page or whatever. So it just reminded me a lot of it was like a map. I mean, obviously it was a map, but
3D.
It wasn't like a drawing like you would think, where you're actually sketching what things look like.
No.
You basically have to learn first a whole alphabet of symbols that mean all these various different formations that someone looking at the map could say, oh, there's there's soda straws over here, or this type of formation, and the wall slopes this way. And it's not like if the wall sloped down at a 45-degree angle towards the middle of the room, he didn't draw a slope. There was just a specific type of hash mark with an arrow on it that just illustrated to the person looking at the map that that's what the room consisted of. So it was really cool. But so we're trying to learn how to find our way to the spikes on the side of an ancient tomb. First, you have to be able to draw a map as to where you're going.
There it is. Breakdown. It was breakdown is what they called it. The Watchers posted this up here. Breakdown is underground rockfall occurring when blocks of rock become detached from the roof of the cave.
Yeah, and there was this one area in the main room where a massive section of the wall had just separated from the wall and fallen over and hit the other wall.
Yeah.
But it was still standing up. It was just leaning over and up against the other wall. And he was drawing it out. And when you go around one side of it, you can see that the shape of the far wall on your left exactly matches the shape of the wall on the right, because that entire section fell over. And then there's another hallway to the right of that down low.
Yeah.
Underneath it. All the way on top of it, there are large, like stalagmite, stalactite formations that used to be joined in its new position of falling over. And they're all broken as that thing shifted back towards the wall. I'm just like, what happened here? This doesn't make any sense. There's this like 4-inch diameter stalagmite that used to be connected to the stalactite above it.
Yeah.
And it's broken off, and the bottom one is shifted back towards the wall.
Yeah.
It's just like totally baffling as to what happened in this cave.
Yeah. And they were saying the same thing, that there was a bunch of mysteries in there about how this whole thing happened. Now, the cave itself was in a rock wall on the basically a straight cliff that's near a waterway. It was dry at the time, but obviously it had water running through it, and the cliff itself was cut by water. So the cave at some point had water probably filled with it, you know. And I was speculating at the time that maybe all that, because the breakdown, all those huge boulders, they did not look new. All of them were smooth and covered in clay and everything like that, and so they looked old. You know, and these guys were like, you don't have to worry about that, because you wonder when you're looking at all these giant boulders that have fallen from the ceiling or from the walls or whatever, you're like, is this going to happen while we're in here? You know, nobody clapped, right? And they were like, no, it just doesn't happen very often. I just pointed out, like, but when it does, it probably all happens at once. Yeah. And it probably happened at the end of the last ice age. But just like those walls are breaking off, we need to take a break. So we're going to take a break. Not a breakdown, but a break. And we'll come back for the second segment of the first hour and continue talking about this maybe and go on to some other things.
Resonance from within the cube of science. Brothers of the Serpent podcast returns. Just so you guys know. Go ahead. That means go.
That last song was called Stalactite.
Oh, yeah.
Just so you guys know.
Normally you interrupt me when I do a long pause in my intro. And then,
I know, I haven't. Keep waiting. I'm learning to wait.
Conditioned response.
Dang it. Yeah, we need to have a hand signal for that. Like when you're planning on, you want a long like silence, just go.
Okay.
You know?
And if I want you to go, I can just be like.
Yeah, so to finish up what we were saying in the last segment, that the cave mapping thing was really cool, and hopefully we'll get to go work on that some more with those guys when they come out there again. I don't know if they're planning on to, but I think they are. They're planning on. They want to map the entire cave very accurately, and we found a lot of little alcoves and things that we need to explore that we didn't get to. So
yeah, and special thanks to our friend and fellow Snake Bro who invited us out.
Yeah.
To be a part of that. That was really awesome, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And hell yeah. That's the whole concept of straight to pyramids.
That's right.
But
straight to caves.
Yeah.
Send us those pictures, man. It's been like over a week. What's the deal?
You shouldn't be doing that because they're going to be in the show notes. People are going to be like, he has the pictures. But yeah, we had a good time doing that, exploring the cave and then exploring the property. It's a beautiful piece of property.
Yeah.
And all kinds of good stuff out there.
Yeah.
Caves, dinosaur footprints, ancient stuff. It's great.
Yeah. So, okay. In this, some of the stuff that I missed about the missing people. This article that I read from Mysterious Universe about the like mass vanishings, where we were talking about like a lot of them were military, right? You remember that the all like 3,000 dudes just disappear off the front for Japan and China, and like
walk into a fog.
Right. Yeah, they walk into a fog and disappear. The Roman legion.
The cloud busted the group of people.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm going to back up a bit and read something that I already read, but I just want to remind people of this part. Right. So further weirdness came about in the following years when in 1945, a train carrying hundreds of passengers heading from Guangdong to Shanghai, China, failed to reach its destination, and intensive searches turned up no trace of where the train or its people had gone. So you guys might remember that.
Yeah.
That was one of the last things I read. The only thing turned up of note during the search was an odd lake that had sprung up from nowhere.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. In November of the same year, a group of around 100 Soviet forces heading for a train station suddenly inexplicably vanished en route. A subsequent investigation turned up a camp that had been halfway set up in a fire that had been put out, but no sign of where the men had gone. So that's where I stopped. Okay. So this next part is actually pretty interesting. I thought, like, normally on a lot of the Mysterious Universe articles, they'll have a sort of a finishing paragraph where they just basically recount everything, and sometimes I skip that, but I shouldn't have skipped this. So he says, what lies at the heart of these sorts of mass vanishings? Is there some rational explanation, or is there something far more bizarre than we could possibly imagine at work here? There have been numerous theories as to what may lie behind these mysterious disappearances, ranging from meteorite strikes to spontaneous earthbound black holes or interdimensional portals that open up to swallow large numbers of people before flickering out of existence, to UFOs, to even an ancient Greek god known as Proteus. This is the part that I found fascinating. Which is said to be a vast mass of protoplasm that lies dormant deep in the bowels of the earth that occasionally surfaces to feed. The Proteus theory was in modern days suggested by the author Dean Koontz, who wrote of this as an explanation for mass disappearances in his horror novel Phantoms. Koontz explains, it is an enormous mass of protoplasm covering maybe an area of some square kilometers, some millions of years of age. It is probably one of the very first forms of life existing in the entrails of Earth or deep in the oceans. Once or twice in a century, it eats people, dissolving and digesting them almost entirely. Deep pools of water were found in the huts of the Roanoke colony. A Chinese pilot searching for a missed train spotted from air a small lake that seemed to have emerged from nowhere. Frozen water was found in the huts of an abandoned small Eskimo village. Right? Remember we read about that?
Yeah.
In 1930, the human body is 90% water, and that was perhaps all that was left of the dissolved victims of Proteus. So that I found to be fascinating right there. Proteus. So from now on, we'll know. Eaten by Proteus. Either that or the boulders, right?
I mean, okay, so he's got a name, but I don't understand the description of this being. Like,
What, that he's like a... Well, because
protoplasm?
Yeah, Proteus, but Proteus also means like precursor, or like, like he's the first, right? So he's like one of the, like when you look at mythology, the first beings that come into being at the beginning of the universe always are formless, almost shapeless, and are not given personalities. And Proteus is one of those types. Not necessarily it's a god, but in the like formless, personalityless, like early types, right? So think of him as a large subterranean pool of algae that, like an acid that nevertheless seems to have some kind of agency, right? And every once in a while, it surfaces and swallows a shitload of people. And trains, and
and megafauna.
I'm sure he was pissed about the train. He wanted the one. Yeah,
that one had a shell on it.
Yeah, I hate the ones with the shells. You got to pick your teeth afterwards. So I thought that was interesting. I can't believe I missed that the first time. The whole thing about Proteus, that was really cool. So,
what is protoplasm? The first plasm?
yeah, proto means first. It also is like prototype, right? It's the first. It's like the least well formed prototype.
Yeah.
So protoplasm. The Watcher gives us a definition here. The colorless material comprising the living part of a cell, including the cytoplasm, nucleus, and other organelles? Organelles? Organelle.
So it's like a mass of cell material or cells, maybe.
Yeah. Like
the blob.
Yeah, it's jelly. Clear.
It's obviously jelly.
Formless. And,
That can move itself around.
yeah, it's full of nutrients and consciousness.
It's basically a cepha, right? It's a big blob of jelly that's mad.
Right. Probably has an eye somewhere. If you keep looking at it, an eye will show up right before it eats you.
Right.
A big blob of jelly that's mad. Yeah.
That's what they are.
Cephas.
I've never seen one that looks happy.
Yeah, they all look pissed. Yeah. Okay, so the other thing I missed was also in another article, the one that I read about the Inuit village where everybody disappeared. Okay, so at the end of that, he says, historical records are chock full of stories of people who just mysteriously disappeared. So I'm not sure why these cases are in here, but he says, take the strange case of Orion Williamson, a farmer from Selma, Alabama, who was said to have vanished into thin air in front of his wife, son, and 2 neighbors while strolling across his property in July of 1854. The entire community turned out to search for the farmer to no avail, but Williamson's son swore he heard the ghostly cries of his father emanating from the field for weeks following his bizarre evaporation.
Whoa.
Then there's the astonishing case of a shoemaker from Warwickshire, England, by the name of James Byrne Warson. Warson's penchant for bragging about his long-distance running abilities had finally worn down the patience of his drinking buddies, Hammerson Burns and Barham Wise, who challenged their mate to run the 40-mile distance from Lymington to Coventry. Warson accepted the bet, and within the hour, the trio were on their way, with Warson jogging and Burns and Wise following close behind in a horse-drawn cart. The incredibly fit Warson seemed to be enjoying himself, running at a solid pace and joking with his buddies, until he tripped just 20 feet ahead of his friends. Burns and Wise watched in abject horror as their friend fell forward with a, quote, awful cry of terror, unquote, then vanished before their eyes. As in the Williams case, the search for the missing cohort proved fruitless. I could go on and on with cases like the one above, but you get the point. Suffice it to say that there is genuine precedent for unexplained disappearances, ones that even eyewitnesses are at a loss to explain.
It was murder!
Yeah. A lot of people explain that one as like, obviously they killed the guy because he was like winning the bet, and they just buried him in the field and then claimed that he tripped and vanished.
Yeah.
We know that story. We know that explanation. We're looking at other ones.
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Murder!
Someone was on Stash's property.
Okay, so I just like to point out that like a lot of these disappearances, the common explanations don't always work, you know, and like with that particular one where the guy vanishes, like you could say the same thing with the family, and people did with both of these cases. Like everybody tried to say that obviously they were murdered and hidden. There was just zero evidence for any of that, and
Right.
you know,
It was a really good murder.
yeah, that was also, you know, they got away with it, you know. But people claimed witchcraft, but these are too old people to claim aliens, you know. So there was no aliens or UFO explanations or anything like that, or probably not even Proteus. I don't know about that, but I think the point that the author was trying to make is that we have these mass disappearances where it's obviously not murder. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I guess the people of Roanoke could have been murdered, but
There was no evidence for that.
Right.
I mean, there, you know.
yeah, there was no evidence for it. And it's kind of like Mary Celeste style, or like the village of Ajikuni, where people show up, like the guy shows up and there's still fires going, and food is burnt, and you know, like and then there's no footprints going anywhere. And then even like, you know, if they were murdered, well, why did they dig up the graves?
Yeah.
You know?
And why wasn't all their stuff stolen? I mean,
Yeah, exactly. So
it's like thinking of just like typical war type scenarios.
Yeah.
You know, like some tribe goes into some other tribe's camp and they murder everybody.
yeah.
They don't just leave all of the useful stuff there, right? If they're
Yeah.
willing to go in and murder every man, woman, and child, They usually don't drag their bodies out of there afterwards.
Yeah.
And clean up with a whole mess.
Right.
And then leave all of their stuff nice and neat in their stew and their pots and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's strange. Yeah.
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 It's
Yeah.
plunderless pillaging.
There you go. It's sort of like
That's what aliens do, folks.
Right.
It's plunderless pillaging.
It's sort of like the tombs that have been looted.
Yeah.
And all the loot's still there.
Right. Only the body is gone.
Right.
Right. And you knew there was a body there because there's a very large square stone box that's
Yeah.
empty.
Yeah. And it's
Right.
full of grave goods all around it,
Right.
but the box is empty.
Right.
But it was because it was looted.
And the box is 10 feet long.
yeah, exactly.
So obviously there was someone in there.
Yeah. Yep. So, do you remember the story of the? There was an unopened it was a pristine tomb that they had opened up in China or somewhere around China or whatever, and they had gone in there and they found that little tiny ring watch. Do you remember that story? I was talking about this with somebody the other day, like about these mysteries of like, and this isn't a disappearance; it's a mystery of. It's an artifact that really is out of place. Like, this can't be here is the point. Like, the tomb had never been, they said, it was pristine. It had never been opened since it had been closed after the person was put in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I dug around looking at this and I wasn't able to like figure out how they decided that. And like, it may be that they just decided that because everything was still there, including the corpse was still in the box. Okay.
Yeah.
The skeleton or whatever. So they decided that it was pristine because everything was in place and nothing had been disturbed. And yet...
There were no footprints in the dust.
That's right.
There was no guy on the spikes on the wall.
That's right. That's right. The traps were all unsprung. The large stone ball was still in its place way up there. Yeah. The spikes were still in the ceiling. Yeah.
There were no skeletons attached to them.
That's right. So they decided it was a pristine tomb for whatever reason, and I couldn't find out if that meant that they actually like did like really look around to see has anybody ever gotten in here and didn't disturb anything and then got back out. I don't know if there's a way to tell that. Like, I'm sure that like, so if you seal something with stone and then it's covered with dirt, right? The blocks would have. You would be able to tell if the soil had been disturbed or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know if they checked that or not.
Now, well, unless it was somebody like you. Like, if you had gotten in there, they'd come in there and there's like all the gold stuff and the diamonds and everything is all still in place. And like the spikes there's no skeletons on the spikes. But way later, after they've like researched the tomb and all this stuff, they find like this one skeleton that's just way over there behind this thing with an ancient book. And it's like, it's just like dead. Start reading the book. What was this guy doing in here? Obviously, he was after ancient knowledge.
Yeah. All the candles and the torches in the tomb seem to be over by this guy. And he's almost to the end of the book.
Yeah.
But he's dead. And all the candles
Yeah.
and torches are like...
And then like you flip the page and it's how to get out. Next page, like the last page. Should have read the table of contents.
That's right. No, I would just be reading the book because I'm like, holy shit, this is an ancient book.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I don't care about getting out. I'm like reading the book and yeah. I get to that how to get out and be like, well, I'll read that later. Next book. Next book. Yeah. So what I'm getting at is somewhere near the sarcophagus, the box. It's not really a sarcophagus, but the stone box that the body was in, either on top of it or next to it or something like that, they found this little ring. It's a ring that would go on your finger, but it's a watch. Okay, now this is a tomb that's very ancient. No watches,
Yeah.
right? According to the standard model, the first actual watch was built to solve the longitude problem,
Right.
in the 1800s. Okay, and not only that, but this is a Swiss ring watch, which were only made for a very short period of time by certain Swiss watchmakers, and they were kind of a fad for a little while. And that's what this is. It's a Swiss ring watch. And I mean, as far as I remember the story,
Like it's the actual brand.
yeah,
brand name on
the
it.
maker is stamped. Now, how did a Swiss ring watch get into like a pristine tomb in China? What is going on here?
Are you suggesting?
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. A portal. Most people were like, time traveler, but why time travel? It just could be teleportation. Or it could be like what happens to lost things? Where do all those left socks go? I don't know. That's just it's a very strange story. The whole, it's not explained. Like the tomb itself was unlooted. There was no obvious means of entry, and yet near the sarcophagus was this watch, a ring watch. Now I actually need to check the story because I can't remember. Maybe if the box is empty, then I'll be thinking that somebody came in there to get the skeleton because it was a long head or something like that. And they lost their Swiss ring watch, and it means it's the Swiss.
That reminded me, though, when you brought up aliens a little while ago, there was one other story that
Wait, did I bring up aliens?
Yeah, you were
sure,
just
yeah.
talking about alien abduction in terms
yeah.
of mass disappearances and all this. It was before alien abduction was what you were saying, like,
Yeah.
Was a thing. But I realized I had one other story. It's just a side note, but like this guy who was supposedly abducted by aliens 45 years ago
Okay.
has finally, he's never talked about it.
Oh, wow.
Like his friend, it was like him and his friend both were abducted together. And his friend had talked about it before, but he finally, I think he passed away or something. And so this guy finally, just like after 45 years of like never talking about it to anybody, like his wife was just telling him like, dude, you need to
confirm his story?
you just need to like get this out. Like you need to do it. And so he wrote a book about the whole thing.
Oh, wow. I need to get it.
Yeah.
Is this the one that movie was based on? The Fire in the Sky?
It might be. I haven't read the story since
Because there was a kind of a famous story of like friends that were abducted. They were fishing in a lake or something like that. And this movie was made.
Yeah, I think they were fishing.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Fire in the Sky. Yeah, so Fire in the Sky, I've heard.
Calvin Parker is his name.
Yeah, Fire in the Sky, I've heard is a fantastic movie, but is a horrendous rendition of their actual story. It wasn't like that. Like it was massively Hollywoodized, but the movie is good. That's what I've heard anyway. But yeah, that story is crazy.
Yeah, he says like, I think they injected us with something to calm us down.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. Whatever. The story's all about like kind of, a short version of the encounter.
Yes.
But the book is called Pascagoula.
Yes.
The Closest Encounter.
Yeah. The Pascagoula
My Story
incident.
by Calvin Parker.
Wow. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, sometime we need to do a whole show on like some of the biggest alien abduction stories, because there are like, the pop culture thing, you're like, okay, whatever, like alien abductions, but really when you start reading these people's accounts and you realize that well, first of all, the first thing I did was I went to read some of the people who had paid attention to them, and like one of them was, I can't remember his name right now, but he was a doctor, Harvard. I think he was a Harvard doctor, and he's dead now. He's passed away, but he was a psychologist, and he started looking at these people who had claimed to have had abductions, and like he started out not believing the abduction, obviously thinking it had nothing to do with aliens, but he was like, look, as a psychologist, I can tell that these people have been traumatized. Yeah. So he went from that his psychological...
They've suffered some type of trauma.
Yes, his psychological evaluation of them was that they had been traumatized, and he like went from there, and he eventually became convinced that they were actually experiencing something, if not abductions, they were experiencing something that is outside of human understanding.
Yeah. And this guy, like, it was like him and his best friend or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they experienced it together.
Yeah.
And, like, after they talked about it, and this guy, Parker, didn't want to tell anyone.
Right.
But his friend, I guess his name was, like, Hickson or something.
Yeah.
He was like, dude, we need to tell some people. So they ended up, like, contacting the Air Force Base or something that was nearby and telling them the story or something.
Yeah. The Watcher the doctor was John Mack. That was the name of the doctor.
Yeah.
Psychologist from Harvard.
But it's like, imagine, you know, you and your best friend both experience something together like that.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if you go out and start telling the story, even though you have somebody there that you totally trust that also experienced the whole thing, like, people are just going to be like, oh my God, bullshit. Yeah. And you're just like, dude, it's like,
yeah, this really happened.
Yeah.
Something happened to them. Like, that's the thing. Like the Pascagoula incident, there are other ones that where you just look at it and you're
and
like,
it's hard to explain when people, like, because a lot of this, you know, the scriptards are like, they suffered some type of hallucination or whatever.
Yeah,
well, how
they're claiming they're trying to make money. A lot of times they're like, oh, they're just trying to make money off it because these people ended up getting asked to come speak at conferences. And they're like, oh, yeah, they're just trying to make money.
Yeah, this guy had a 45-year plan.
Yeah.
Right?
The Watcher says, if either of you ever get abducted, you better tell him to come get me too. You're already in space, Watcher. If they abduct us, we'll be like, can you swing us by the Watcher's place? Like, you maybe pick him up too. Or maybe he can meet you. I don't know.
And if you're going to do surgery on me, can you fix this problem in my back?
That has actually happened. People who have been abducted have had, like, miraculous surgical, like, repairs done on them. You know, but we'll have to get into this sometime in one of the shows, like the whole thing about implants. There is some crazy stuff about implants. Like, there are some doctors, again, these are physical, that have gone in and they're like, okay, this person thinks they have something implanted in them by aliens. But they look and they're like, okay, there is an object there that they think that somehow got in there, but, you know, whatever. The person sleepwalks or something. They got this thing in their foot or in their hand or behind their ear. And then they go to take it out, and it, like, runs away from them in the person's flesh. You know, there's some crazy stuff about that where they're you know, and then sometimes they get them out, and they're like little crystal shards. Yeah.
If you're going to put a crystal shard in me, can you make it skull shaped? I would like a little crystal skull running around in my body, running away from doctors.
It needs to be able to laugh too. What's interesting about that, the implant thing and the crystal stuff, is that if you look at indigenous or native, you know, or tribal culture legend and lore about shamanism, or what they would call seers, is that seers are chosen by the spirits. Spirits, in this sense, like, think of them as, like, just this is what these cultures call what we would call aliens or whatever. It's the spirits. Yeah. It's the same deal, right? The spirits come to them at night, and, like, the shaman is chosen by the spirits, not by the tribe or by other shamans. The shamans can tell when he's been chosen as a child. And they're like, okay, you're going to be one of us. But they go through this whole, during the abductions, they are taken apart. Okay, this is the origin of the, what is it called? The Wounded Man. So in a lot of cave paintings and other shamanistic type drawings or whatever, there's the Wounded Man. Like, you'll see him and he's standing there and he's got slashes through him, or he's full of arrows, or he's got spears or whatever. That's the Wounded Man. And they tell these stories about these spirits that take them and they completely dismantle their bodies and then replace certain organs with crystals and then put them back together. And it's very painful, and, like, it's this massive ordeal or whatever. And that's what makes them a shaman. And then they're connected to the spirit realm from then on. And if you go through abduction accounts, these people talk about think of it as like the same story. It looks like the same story, but told from a technological and sort of pop culture viewpoint. Like, these are aliens instead of spirits. They're doing weird medical experiments instead of dismantling them. They're putting implants in them instead of replacing organs with crystal. You know what I'm saying? It's the same story.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that it's about 2% of the population that claims to have been abducted in some form by aliens. And it's the same percent of the population that are basically the shamanists in these tribal cultures. So it's like there's some. I thought for a long time that people who would get abducted by aliens, quote unquote, in Western civilization would be shamans if we were a tribal culture. They would be. We just don't. We've lost the shaman. Western civilization has completely lost the shamanist path.
Yeah.
And it's been burned out of us by various institutions and religions and other things. So you end up with this. The spirits are still doing what they've always done, right? Trying to provide the human race with seers, people who can see more of reality than most of us can. And these people are horribly traumatized for their entire lives because they have no idea what's happening because they don't have something cultural to latch onto to explain it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so they've built this massive alien mythos because you got to have something to explain it. And these people find each other and they have meetings and all of them end up with, they're whereas they all have massive, they have psychological issues. Whereas in tribal cultures, the shamans don't have psychological issues, but that's because they have this ancient, like, cultural thing to latch onto it to explain it. And then they have older people who, like, sort of mentor them through the whole process.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I find the whole thing fascinating.
Yeah, that's cool. That reminded me that we had a discussion, and we were going to bring this up again. I know you have other stuff you want to get to.
It's all right.
We're almost done with the segment, so
Yeah.
I'll just throw it out there. The black hole proximity theory that we had.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about it again, and like when I first thought of it, I was thinking of the whole situation of the time dilation backwards.
Yeah.
And then you
Paimon.
corrected me on that. Yeah. Paimon. So we talked about it again, and it was like, okay, well, what if the whole black hole situation was the same situation we had talked about before, where we're basically in this stasis of time,
Yeah.
and the rest of the nearby universe and whatever is going normal time speed,
Yeah.
then we would be, our location could possibly be where history is stored, like the
the Akashic records.
Yes. This is where the Akashic records are stored because they last forever here compared to how long they would
Yeah.
last everywhere else.
Yeah.
So,
Like you put your library in a vault in stasis, basically,
Right.
so that it lasts forever. Yeah.
right. And so, like, this is why we have all these crazy ancient structures around, and they're ancient to us.
Yeah.
But they're far more ancient
To the rest of the
rest of the universe. Like, they are really freaking old. And so there's like thinking of it like that in this abduction thing. It's like the reason why the Watchers are there.
Oh, yeah.
they're the librarians.
Yeah.
Right. And then occasionally it's like they come and they deal with the pests in the library or whatever,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yep.
They're also studying like how we're getting along and all that kind of stuff. We're the curators of the galaxy.
But we don't know it.
That's what the Watcher says.
Yeah.
What do you know, Watcher? You're a Watcher.
We're like the Dewey Decimal System. We don't know that we're doing this. They come through and they rifle through our DNA. They're like, oh, here's the thing I need. Pull it out.
Yeah. But it also kind of explains this strange thing about burials here this culture that we've
Oh, yeah.
got, and that came from the kings,
Yeah.
which the kings became kings because it was their divine right. It was given to them
Yeah.
by those who from the heavens came
Yeah.
to rule, right?
yeah.
And so they have these strange rituals for burying them with all their memorabilia, which is something that is a tradition that's designed for this place, right?
Right.
For where we are, Earth.
Story or history.
Right. The Pillars of Enoch. Yeah, exactly.
Holy crap. All right, so before we take this next break, the Watcher threw up another interesting note here. He says there was a documentary done called on patient number 17. Was it called Patient 17? where they found a metallic little erratic floating in this guy, and radio scanning electron microscopy showed that the iron from that piece of the iron from that thing was almost certainly non-terrestrial.
Whoa.
Which you can tell by looking at isotopes and stuff like that. And the amount of nickel and other things like that. You can tell if the iron came from Earth, if it's Earth-based, or if it's like space-based.
He just got hit by a tiny meteorite.
Ow! Freaking aliens!
Snakes from space!